My brother-in-law and his girlfriend planned to sabotage my wedding with public humiliations, but I contacted his 4 ex-girlfriends, and they exposed him in front of 300 guests. The bride left him at the altar. I'm 24 years old. I work in digital marketing, and I need to tell this story because what happened with my husband's brother and his psycho girlfriend still makes me smile every time I think about it. I guess I should start from the beginning. When I met Thomas like 3 years ago at a mutual friend's party. He was super shy, worked in construction, and basically was the complete opposite of his brother Patrick in every possible way. And that, honestly, was what made me fall in love with him from the start. The thing is that Thomas was always the younger brother who stayed in the background. Patrick was the golden child of the family, the type who always got everything he wanted, the one the parents bragged about at every family gathering, the successful car salesman with his perfect smile and his ability to literally manipulate any situation to his advantage. Thomas told me that his whole life had been like that Patrick always had preference, that if Thomas got a B, Patrick got an A, that if Thomas played soccer, Patrick was team captain, those kinds of things that basically destroy your self-esteem when you're a kid. But Thomas was never bitter about it. I mean, he just accepted his role and moved on with his life, working hard, being a genuinely good person. And that's what I loved about him. Everything was going well between us. We'd been dating for like 2 years when Patrick showed up one day at a family dinner with Nicole. And let me tell you, from the first second I saw her, I knew that woman was trouble. She arrived in sky-high heels, a dress that probably cost more than my 3 months' rent, and that superiority attitude that makes you feel like you're constantly being evaluated. She shook my hand with that fake smile, the one that doesn't reach the eyes, and said something like, "Oh, so you're Victoria. Thomas has told us a lot about you," with a tone that clearly implied that nothing she'd heard was impressive. Nicole was an assistant manager at an expensive boutique, or something like that, but she talked as if she were the CEO of an international corporation. She spent the whole dinner making passive-aggressive comments about everything, like how Thomas's parents' house decoration was outdated, how my dress was cute considering it probably wasn't designer, how Thomas should consider a more lucrative career than construction. Patrick just laughed at her comments as if they were the most clever thing in the world. And Thomas's parents, well, they were so used to putting Patrick on a pedestal that they basically ignored how horrible Nicole was and acted as if it was a blessing that their oldest son had found someone like that. Things got worse when Thomas told me he wanted to propose to me. We were at his apartment. It was like a Wednesday night, and he showed me the ring he'd been saving to buy for months. It was beautiful. It wasn't huge or ostentatious, but it was perfect. And I cried like a baby, because I never thought someone would love me in such a genuine and pure way. I said yes, obviously, even though technically he hadn't formally asked me yet, and we decided he'd make it official the following weekend at a dinner with his family so they could celebrate with us. But it turns out Patrick found out about the plans somehow. I don't know if Thomas told him or if the parents mentioned something. And literally 2 days before Thomas was going to officially propose to me, Patrick organized his own elaborate proposal for Nicole at an expensive restaurant with a ring that probably cost triple Thomas's. He posted it all over social media, made a whole show of it, and when the weekend came and Thomas formally proposed to me at the family dinner, it was basically like a footnote compared to Patrick's spectacle. The parents were excited for us, I guess. But half the conversation that night was about Patrick's proposal and the wedding plans he and Nicole were already making. Nicole decided her wedding would be like 6 months later, and she planned it as if it were the royal wedding or something. Every time we saw her at family gatherings, she only talked about her $15,000 dress, her exclusive venue, her guest list of 300 people, her honeymoon in the Maldives. Meanwhile, Thomas and I were planning something more modest but meaningful to us. Something like 4 months after Patrick's wedding, at a nice but affordable venue with our close friends and family. What happened next was what basically changed everything. It was like 2 months before our wedding, and I had gone to Thomas's parents' house to drop off some things for a family gathering we were going to have that weekend. I arrived early. Supposedly no one was home, so I used the key they'd given me and went in. I was leaving the things in the kitchen when I heard voices coming from the living room. I recognized Patrick and Nicole's voices, and they were talking quietly, but I hear clearly because the house is old and has that weird acoustics where sound travels everywhere. I froze when I heard my name. Nicole was saying something like, "It's going to be so perfect. Victoria's going to look like an idiot in front of everyone," and Patrick was laughing and saying it was brilliant. Basically, I listened for like 10 minutes, while they planned how to ruin my wedding. Nicole had convinced Patrick that it would be fun to sabotage our special day because, according to her, Thomas had always been jealous of Patrick and deserved to be humiliated a little, and I, being the bride, was the perfect target. The plan they had was twisted. Honestly, Nicole was going to contact all my bridesmaids before the wedding and basically plant drama among them, telling each one different things about the others to create conflict. Patrick was going to give a speech as brother of the groom, where he would supposedly tell embarrassing and humiliating stories about Thomas from his childhood, things that would make him look bad in front of all the guests. Nicole also planned to make comments to my family about how her wedding had been much more elegant and successful than ours, basically making me look like a second-class bride. I stood there in the kitchen with my hands shaking, trying not to make noise, and I felt like I was going to throw up. I waited until I heard them leave, and then I left the house and went straight to Thomas's apartment. When I told him what I'd heard, he went livid, like I'd never seen him so angry. He wanted to confront Patrick immediately, but I stopped him because I had a better idea. If Patrick and Nicole wanted to play dirty, we were going to play dirtier. I started investigating Patrick, specifically his romantic history before Nicole. Thomas had mentioned in passing that Patrick had had like 1,000,000 girlfriends before Nicole and that all the relationships ended badly, but he'd never gone into details. I found several of his ex-girlfriends on social media, like Facebook and Instagram, and started sending them private messages very carefully, explaining who I was and asking if they'd be willing to talk about their relationship with Patrick. The responses I got were pure gold. There was a girl, Amy, who dated Patrick for 2 years and caught him cheating on her with 2 different people at the same time. Another, Becca, discovered that Patrick had been stealing money from her bank account for months to finance his lifestyle. Lisa found messages on his phone where Patrick basically talked horribly about her with his friends while still in the relationship. Danielle, his most recent ex before Nicole, left him when she discovered he'd lied to her about practically everything in his life, from his salary to where he actually worked. The thing is that all these women were more than willing to help me when I explained that Patrick was about to get married and that Nicole probably didn't know anything about his true character. I told them what Patrick and Nicole were planning to do to Thomas and me, and basically they all said they wanted revenge for how Patrick had treated them. We started planning something that to this day seems both brilliant and horrible to me. Patrick and Nicole's wedding was at a super fancy venue on the outskirts of the city, one of those places with huge gardens and ballrooms with crystal chandeliers. Thomas and I went obviously because we were family, although every second I was there made me want to scream the truth in front of everyone. The ceremony was exactly as ostentatious as Nicole had promised, with live music, imported flowers, and a dress that probably weighed more than me. When it came to the moment in the ceremony where the officiant asks if anyone has any reason why this couple shouldn't get married, what we'd planned happened. Amy stood up from her seat in the back of the venue. She was wearing an elegant dress that we'd coordinated so she'd look presentable, and said loud and clear, "I have something to say." The silence that fell in that room was incredible, like you could hear people breathing. Amy walked to the front and started telling her story about how Patrick had cheated on her repeatedly, how he'd lied to her about everything, how he'd manipulated every aspect of their relationship. Before anyone could fully process what was happening, Becca stood up too, and then Lisa, and then Danielle. Each of them had evidence, printed photos, screenshots of messages, bank records in Becca's case. It was like watching a train derail in slow motion. Nicole was standing there at the altar in her $15,000 dress, completely pale, looking at Patrick as if she'd never seen him before. Patrick tried to deny it all, obviously, saying those women were crazy, that they were jealous, that it was all lies, but the evidence was too clear. Thomas's parents were in complete shock, Nicole's family was horrified, and the guests didn't know whether to stay or leave. Some people started getting up to leave. But Nicole, in a move that still surprises me, decided the wedding would continue anyway. I think she was in complete denial, or maybe too proud to cancel after all the money and planning. I'm not sure. But the ceremony continued. It was the most awkward thing I've witnessed in my life, and the reception was even worse with people whispering and looking at Patrick as if he were a criminal. During the following weeks, Patrick and Nicole obviously tried to figure out who had orchestrated that whole disaster. Patrick suspected Thomas and me because, according to him, we were the only ones with motives to do something like that to him, and technically he wasn't wrong. He called us like 50 times, sent aggressive messages, even showed up at our apartment one night yelling in the hallway until we threatened to call the police. Nicole was doing her own investigation, contacting Patrick's ex-girlfriends to ask them who had asked them to go to the wedding, but the girls stayed firm in not revealing that I'd been the one who contacted them. Eventually, Thomas and I decided to tell his parents the truth. We went to their house one afternoon, sat down with them in the living room, and explained everything from the beginning. From what I heard Patrick and Nicole planning, to how I contacted the ex-girlfriends to expose Patrick. I expected them to get angry with us, to tell us we'd gone too far. But to my surprise, Thomas's mother just sighed and said she'd always known something was wrong with Patrick, but had never wanted to confront it. The father admitted they'd favored Patrick for years because of his charisma and superficial success, and that now they realized they'd been unfair to Thomas his whole life. I thought that's where it would all end. Like that, Patrick and Nicole got married anyway, and eventually would move on with their lives even though their reputation was ruined. But Nicole wasn't going to let things go like that. Like 2 weeks before our wedding, we discovered that Patrick and Nicole had gotten our guest list. I don't know how. Probably bribing someone at the venue or something, and had sent fake invitations to like 50 random people telling them to come to our wedding to basically crash it and ruin our special day as revenge for what we did at theirs. When I found out about this, I was furious. I mean, we'd already played our card and won, and they still wanted to continue with this childish drama. But Thomas, who's much calmer than me, called the venue and talked to security, explained the situation and gave them photos of Patrick and Nicole with instructions not to let them in under any circumstances. We also hired extra security for the wedding day, like 2 guards at the entrance checking the guest list and verifying IDs. Our wedding day arrived and I was super nervous. Not about marrying Thomas because that was the only thing I was completely sure about, but about whether Patrick and Nicole would manage to ruin the day somehow. Turns out they did try to get in. They showed up at the venue like an hour before the ceremony, dressed elegantly as if they were regular guests, and when security asked for their names and checked the list, obviously they weren't on it. Patrick tried to do his charming manipulation thing, saying we were family and there was an error with the list, but the security guards weren't convinced and basically escorted them off the property. I found out about this like 10 minutes before walking down the aisle because one of my bridesmaids told me, thinking I should know. Honestly, I expected to feel satisfied or victorious, but all I felt was pity. Pity because Patrick and Nicole had spent so much time and energy trying to ruin us when they could have used that time to work on their own disastrous relationship. But that pity lasted like 2 seconds before I focused on what was really important, which was marrying the love of my life surrounded by people who genuinely loved and supported us. The wedding was perfect. And when I say perfect, I don't mean it was ostentatious or expensive or Instagram-worthy like Patrick and Nicole's, but perfect in the sense that it was exactly what Thomas and I wanted. We had like 100 guests, all close friends and family who really mattered to us. My dad walked me down the aisle and cried like a baby. Thomas also cried when he saw me. Basically, everyone cried at some point. The vows we wrote were sincere and personal. The food was incredible. The DJ played exactly the type of music we liked. And we danced until 2 in the morning, without worrying about keeping up appearances or impressing anyone. And the best part of it all is that I didn't think about Patrick or Nicole even once during the reception. I was too busy being happy, dancing with my husband, laughing with my friends, hugging Thomas's parents who finally seemed to understand what really mattered in life. It was the happiest night of my life, no exaggeration, and no one could ruin it for us no matter how hard they tried. The story of Patrick and Nicole has an epilogue that still makes me laugh when I think about it. Like 3 months after our wedding, we found out from Thomas's mother that Nicole had discovered even more of Patrick's lies, things that not even the ex-girlfriends knew about, like huge secret debts, hidden bank accounts, and evidence that he was still contacting other women even after getting married. Nicole left him in the most spectacular way possible, posting everything on social media with evidence included, basically completely destroying Patrick's reputation in front of literally everyone they knew. She filed for annulment alleging fraud, and as far as I know, Patrick is living in a friend's basement trying to rebuild his life from scratch. I know it probably sounds like I'm a horrible person for orchestrating everything that happened at Patrick's wedding, and maybe I am a little bit, but every time I think about what they were planning to do to us, how they wanted to humiliate us on the most important day of our lives just for fun and cruelty, I can't feel remorse. Thomas sometimes says, maybe we went too far, that we should have been the bigger people and just canceled Patrick and Nicole from our lives without revenge. And maybe he's right. I don't know. But what I do know is that now Thomas has a much better relationship with his parents, who finally realized how they'd unfairly favored Patrick for years and are making a conscious effort to change that. I know that Thomas and I are happier than ever, living in our small but cozy apartment, planning our future together without the toxic drama of his brother. And I know that every time I see our wedding photos, all I feel is gratitude for having married a genuinely good man who loves me for who I really am, not for appearances or status or any of the superficial things that Patrick and Nicole valued so much. The last time we heard anything from Patrick was like 2 months ago, when he sent Thomas a text message saying he wanted to talk and fix things between them. Thomas left it on read and didn't respond, and I don't plan to encourage him to. Some relationships just aren't worth saving, and after 25 years of being the ignored and manipulated younger brother, I think Thomas finally realized that, and I'm here to support him in that decision, now and always, because that's what people who really love each other do. They don't plan cruel revenge against their partner. They don't try to sabotage the most important moments of their life. They're just there, supporting each other no matter what. And that, at the end of the day, is all that really matters.